Last week was such a hectic week in the markets with fears of the markets crashing, only to rebound by Friday. We also had the SpaceX IPO as well. Welcome back to another weekly recap where we go over everything that happened last week. And then we're going to go on to exactly what to look for coming into next week. Make sure to stick to the end of the video where I talk about 5 of my top watches coming into this week. Last week, if you did look to buy the dip, especially on some of the semiconductors, Intel was up very nicely. We had SNDK, we had some semis leading the markets back towards the upside, of course. So with that being said, let's hop straight into my P&L calendar for this month so far. To give you guys an updated P&L of this month, $50,000 so far for the first 2 weeks of June. Been an absolutely fantastic trading month so far. Trade win percentage 63%, profit factor 3.27, daily win percentage 88%, and my average win to loss ratio, which is 1.91. The first week was $24,000. Last week was $26,000, making up $50,000. Tuesday was actually probably one of the easier days to trade. I kind of talked about this, but I actually ended up losing on this day. This was the best trending day last week, but then followed up by a lot of string of nice winning trades to end off the week. I basically traded Intel almost every single day last week towards the upside. So we'll talk about that here, of course. Let's go on to the economic calendar. Next week, we do have our live masterclass. So make sure if you haven't signed up for that, that is going to be in the link in the description below. And then we're followed up by live trading the day after. At least for this week, there's not too much to keep an eye out for. We do have FOMC that is going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. We have core retail sales in the morning, but the main thing, of course, is going to be that FOMC statement plus the press conference as well. That's going to be at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Thursday, we have the unemployment claims as well. So with that being said, let's hop straight into the charts and let's take a look at the weekly time frame here on the SPY and Qs. So after last week's big red candle where the market started pulling back, we talked about the key level coming into last week, which was our double bottom on the daily time frame. And on the weekly time frame, I would consider this our higher low. Plus, as you can see, our 9 EMA sitting right there on the QQQ. So last week, you can see we ended up digging deeper down into that 700. Ultimately, we end up having a strong candle close, but on the daily chart, we closed underneath, but as I mentioned, the weekly chart ended up forming a bullish hammer stick candle. So if we're looking at this on a week by week basis, the markets are still very bullish. If we're looking at the overall trend, you can see we're building up higher lows. We ended up having our first pullback that is now getting bought up here on the weekly chart. So moving forward, what I like to see now is really this continuation back up in towards our all-time highs. What would invalidate this structure for me would be if, let's say, the next weekly candle, we completely break underneath, close bearish and invalidate this higher low, right? Then I'll be a lot more cautious and expect the markets to consolidate a lot more. But based off this weekly profile, we are still bullish here on the Qs and we can expect continuation back up in towards our all-time highs. If you look at this on the daily chart, the key levels that I have marked out is this 700. As you can see last week, we ended up digging deeper down into the 700 on Tuesday. We end up having a nice wick underneath. On Wednesday, we actually end up closing underneath the 700, only to have buyers immediately step in on Thursday. And now you can see Friday prices trying to reverse back towards the upside. So on this daily chart, on this daily time frame, we overshot this daily higher low, right? We broke back underneath. Basically, our key levels that we have marked out is that 720 along with our 690. So you can see price continues higher. This was our higher low that we broke underneath. We end up having a mini head and shoulders here on the hourly time frame. And now we're having this essentially this double bottom here. Right now, what we have in the markets is a potential head and shoulders here on the daily time frame. But if we can invalidate this head and shoulders, we can see a push back up in towards that all-time highs. So the key levels coming to next week is going to be that 720. If we're looking for longs above our 720, reversal back towards the upside, or if it, let's say, rejects off the 720, then we'd be looking for some sort of higher low off our 690 for a pushback towards the upside. But the main thing coming to this week is going to be that reclaim back above that 720, which is going to be necessary if the markets do want to continue back towards the upside. So those are the main levels that we have marked out on the Qs. If we look at this on the NQ chart, similar thesis here. As you can see on the weekly time frame, this is our first pullback. Buyers are stepping in right off our weekly higher low. Basically, this is exactly that 9 EMA. If we go on to that daily chart, key levels that we have marked out as well is that daily higher low, which is that 28,800. You can see on Tuesday, price broke underneath. And on Wednesday, candle close underneath, followed up by buyers stepping in, defending this level to end off the week strong. So we're basically reclaiming back above. And now we like to see this push back up in towards number one, our 29,600, and that all-time highs back up in towards our 30,800. So for the NQ coming into next week, you can see earlier into the week, we end up having this nice break and retest towards the downside. Now we like to see the flip back above. If we can break back above this 29,750, we can see this continuation back towards the upside. What we don't want to see in the markets is the pop and rejection off this level for a push right back down in towards our last week's range. This is what we don't want to see for upside, is the rejection. If we go on to the SPY chart, similar thesis here. If we're on the weekly time frame, on a week by week basis, the key higher low level that I had was really the 730 here. You can see SPY end up having a nice rally towards the upside. This is our first red candle, so we want to see if buyers step in. You can see price pushes lower. 730 is being defended. Now we like to see this continue push back up in towards that all-time highs. So the weekly time frame is bullish as well. If we're looking at this on a weekly candle, price opened up, pushed lower, buyers stepped in, and we end up closing back inside of the previous week's range. If we look at the daily candle, what we had marked out was our 730. You can see buyers basically stepped in. We also had this daily gap fill here as well. So for the SPY, we ended up overshooting this 730 only to be bought up right at this daily gap. And now, as you can see, now buyers are stepping back in. So for the SPY, we're still bullish on the weekly time frame. The daily, we reclaim back above that 730 here as well. So now we just like to see it maintain above our 730 for that push back up in towards that all-time highs here on the SPY. I haven't even gone on to the hourly time frame, but just based off of the weekly and the daily, we just like to see that continuation back towards the upside here, of course, in the overall markets. If we're looking at the SMH, which has been leading the markets higher, this one's a lot more bullish than the rest of the SPY and Qs. You can see the SMH last week, we dug into a couple key levels only to be bought up. And now you can see some of the semis are leading the markets back higher. We end up having a nice, strong weekly candle close. The location is close to that all-time highs area. If you go on to the daily chart, as you can see, the key levels that we have marked out was this daily gap. We also had the previous all-time highs, which now is turning into support for continuation towards the upside. So for the SMH, we basically bounce right at that 560, and now we like to see this push back up in towards our all-time highs here, of course. So the semis are leading the markets higher. If we take a look at the IWM, this one is making a brand new all-time highs here as well. So the IWM is fairly bullish. This previous retest level is now being used for continuation back towards the upside. So as you can see here, a lot of the semiconductors, a lot of the overall indices themselves are continuing higher with the SPY and Qs bouncing right off that 9 EMA. So we're going to continue a bullish bias here in the markets. That being said, let's hop into some of the tech names that we have coming into this week, starting off with Tesla. I've talked about Tesla the past couple of weeks, really just kind of ranging. There's really not too much to talk about here on the weekly time frame. We did recently have that SpaceX IPO here as well. But the key levels for Tesla is still going to be that break of that 450. Not really too much to talk about. We kind of had this mini downtrend, which we broke underneath. Tesla now, at a minimum, is going to have to reclaim back above that 420 if we want to see any sort of continuation higher. Let's talk about Nvidia. Nvidia is in a very key technical spot. I do like Nvidia a lot here as well. This is our previous all-time highs. You can see we're kind of we ended up having a candle close 2 weeks ago underneath that 210. We are still building up a weekly higher low as well, but I like to see the reclaim back above 210 for any sort of pushback towards the upside. Nvidia has been one of the weaker semiconductors the past 6 to 12 months compared to the rest of the semis. If we're looking at this on the daily chart, we're kind of coming back to that 200 original retest level where we had that nice continuation higher. So for NVIDIA, the reclaim back above that 210 area is going to be key if you want to see any sort of continuation back towards the upside. Let's take a look at AMD here. AMD is still very bullish. Down close candles are being respected for continuation. We're not even coming back down to that 9 EMA here on the weekly time frame. If we're looking at this on the daily time frame, we end up having this daily gap up. Buyers are defending previous all-time highs, plus this daily gap fill here as well. AMD is being defended for that continuation back up in towards that all-time highs. So for AMD, buyers are stepping exactly where they're supposed to. Now let's look for this flip, for this push back up in towards that all-time highs here, of course. As for Apple, we'll talk about this a little bit more, but Apple coming back to that retest of that previous all-time highs. Keep an eye out for buyers to step in for a pushback towards the upside here on the daily time frame. Our key levels that we do have marked out is going to be exactly this 288. We like to see, right, comes down once more, buyers step in for this reversal trade back towards the upside. Google, similar thesis. If we're looking at this one on the weekly time frame, we have our previous all-time highs here. What I like to see is buyers really step in right off that 340 for that pushback up in towards that all-time highs. If we're on the daily chart, buyers stepped in nicely right off that 350 last week. Let's see if we can get this reversal for this pushback up in towards that all-time highs. As for Microsoft, this one's a lot weaker. Not really too much to talk about on this name. This one kind of filled its daily gap. Really strong rejection 2 weeks ago, right off that 460. Something similar to kind of Microsoft, where we have that nice bounce and we end up rejecting, and now we're flushing all the way back towards the downside. Microsoft seems like it's going to have something similar, right? That rejection off that 460, we could see room all the way back down and towards 380 and that 360 here on the higher time frame. So not as bullish on Microsoft. Meta, similar thesis here, consolidating. Amazon pulling back here as well. Netflix pulling back. So a couple of the Mag 7 names pulling back here with the markets rising, which is not really a good sign. So if the markets drop, of course, these tech names are going to be dropping as well. We want to be focusing in on leaders. We don't want to be focusing on names that are lagging behind the markets. SpaceX also recently had its IPO, of course, on Friday. IPO'd around 150 a share. Nice push towards the upside. We're just going to mark out that previous day highs and that previous day lows coming into Monday. We do have options coming out on Tuesday for SpaceX IPO. So we'll see how that shapes up the markets and specifically this ticker in itself. With that being said, let's take a look at some of the semiconductors, starting off with some of the watches that we had last week. Intel, one of my favorite names, right off this 100 key psych level. The key levels that we have marked out was this 100. So hopefully some of you guys were interested in the Intel potential bottom right off that 100. If we're looking at this, let me kind of just zoom this in. We talked about Intel last week in our weekly outlook. I mentioned I bought some Intel shares 2 Fridays ago. Was looking for, of course, a swing back towards the upside within the next few weeks to a month. Overall market's pulling back nicely. So as you can see, Intel offer 100, and you can see buyers stepped in basically perfectly right off that 100 key psych. Right now, as you can see, the commons are already up almost 25% on the underlying. If we're talking about the options contracts, those are up very nicely if you are interested. And of course, that low risk swing back up in towards our all-time highs. I do expect Intel coming to next week above our 125 next level all-time highs here in play. So Intel, we're going to be looking for continuation up in towards that all-time highs level. If we're looking at this one, we have this kind of daily flag forming. Intel above our all-time highs. We have extension all the way up in towards that 150. Marvel, this one pulled back down into that 9 EMA here. Now, what I like to see on this ticker is some sort of consolidation, base above that 250, push back up in towards all-time highs for that next leg towards the upside. MU, this one bouncing right off that 21 EMA. I would have liked to see it dig a little bit deeper, potentially into that 800, but so far buyers are stepping in nicely. For MU, back up and towards that all-time highs here is in play as well. SNDK, this one was one of the names that made a brand new all-time highs. SNDK ended up flagging above this 21, push up in towards that all-time highs and above. AMD, similar thesis, already talked about this one. Nice buyer stepped in, continuation back up in towards that all-time highs. Let's talk about some of the main watches coming into this week, besides the ones that we already took a look at last week. We're going to continue to look for these ones for continuation. Some other names to keep in mind as well. WDC, for a flip back up in towards that all-time highs. This one, if we're looking at this one on the weekly time frame, very bullish. Every single down close candle is being respected. Let's see if we can get that all-time highs push. ARM, this one ended up having a really solid pullback right down in towards that 9 EMA, along with that 21 in this down close candle. ARM buyer stepping in. Let's see if we can get that push back up in towards that all-time highs. TSM here, weekly time frame shaping up fairly nicely. We end up having that previous all-time highs break and retest for TSM, now building up higher lows on the weekly chart as well. Daily time frame building up higher lows. Let's keep an eye on this flip here on TSM back above 420 for this push up in towards that all-time highs. And then Google offer previous all-time highs. Apple offer previous all-time highs here as well. So coming into this week, similar game plan. We're going to be looking for the continuation back towards the upside here on the overall markets. Semis are of course leading the markets higher, so we're going to continue focusing on those ones. Yeah, besides that, I'm going to call it a day here. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this. As I mentioned, we do have that live masterclass that's going to be happening on Tuesday and Wednesday. So make sure to join if you guys haven't already. With that being said, I'll see you guys all tomorrow for my YouTube video on my main channel, and then on Monday for the pre-market prep. All right, take care everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Peace.